up in a country town, I thought I knew how communities or democracy really worked. I'm from Condobolin, a town of about 3,000 people in New South Wales. You see every aspect of a community in a small town. You see every side of people. You see every facet of people, and you see people for who they really are. It's very hard to hide who you are when you live in a country town. I thought community conversations were simple. We have a problem, we get together to solve it, and then we move on with our lives. In my small world, this applied to everything from the tree planting day to fundraising for the local karate club. Oh, it was such a simple upbringing, but then I grew up and I realised how ignorant I was. Because in my lifetime, things have changed a lot. We now have all of these on-demand services, Netflix, Spotify, Uber Eats and more. It's made our lives infinitely easier. As a time-poor person, I love these services. They are great. However, I believe that on-demand services have deeply changed our democracy and the conversations that we have with our communities and with organisations. I'll give you some examples of how we feel like we've become too comfortable with democracy. Life is too easy. Life is too good. We are really, really comfortable, too comfortable. In 2019, 4 million of us voted in the federal election at the pre-polls. A lot of Australian media outlets reported on this. Huge number of people. A lot of us preferred to vote before the Saturday, just in our own time. We wanted that convenience. We really wanted to free up our time on the Saturday instead of voting like everyone else. The rejection of the democracy sausage was real. Not only are we voting early, we are taking our activism online. For example, the highest petition on change.org in Australia this year, with 1.4 million signatures, was one imploring the federal parliament to remove Senator Fraser Anning from Parliament after his appalling comments in the wake of the attacks at Christchurch. This petition, with 1,400,000 signatures, is the second highest on change.org and the highest about Australian matters across the board. So this is really interesting. Can you imagine 1.4 million people taking to the streets in Australia? In Hong Kong, yes, day after day, week after week, month after month, but maybe not here, maybe not right now. Australians love a good petition. So not only are we voting early, taking activism online, we are a bit too exhausted to fill in another survey. I'm sent a survey for everything now, and furthermore, I'm not really sure if they actually do anything. Was I satisfied with my car service? Was I satisfied with my recent doctor's appointment? Did the shop meet expectations with my recent running shoes purchase? I'm exhausted. And furthermore, I'm not really sure what happens with my feedback, if that feedback actually changes anything. So now we have engagement practitioners. Engagement is a profession. There are a number of engagement practitioners here today, leaders. They use a toolbox of skills, all these different skills to engage audiences and to increase citizen engagement. I'm one of those engagement practitioners. And when I say democracy and when I say citizen engagement, what I mean is the way that we engage with our communities. So not only are we participating differently in democracy, there is an increase in anger, this unchecked anger from the public. This is not just in the engagement practitioner profession. This is what we call frontline staff. So principals, nurses, teachers, council workers, paramedics, all of them have experienced across the board a sharp increase in aggression and anger experienced by the public. I noticed this myself as an engagement practitioner. In the mid-2000s, I started a role in local government and it changed over time. I just noticed there was one angry community meeting from that first 6 years when I was on council, and it was about council's plans to raise their rates. We decided we would talk to some drought-stricken farmers or some long-suffering farmers about council's plans with very little prior notice, and they were understandably really angry about this. But the next 6 years were completely different. That verbal and physical abuse just increased. It kept happening in response to contentious local issues or sometimes any issue. So it really increased over time. I found we were constantly absorbing all of this anger from all of these different areas. Those of you who were local will remember the closure of the Parramatta pool in 2016-17 to make way for the Bankwest Stadium. So we ran an online survey during that time. 2,000 people responded to that survey and gave their outline of what they wanted for the future facility. I believe this information was used to inform the current design and potentially the funding announcement that was made. However, there were about 50 to 80 people who were super angry all the time, needed to get their anger out. And the frontline staff bore most of that anger. It was very difficult. So spat on, yelled at, you name it, it happened. I called the police on people. But this anger, this unchecked anger, is increasing, not decreasing. Life is stressful. Modern life is really stressful. It's anxiety-inducing. We are stressed all the time. And furthermore, I think that polarisation of conversations is happening more and more across the board. We have lost that art of having a difficult and respectful conversation in person. So the trends are pre-polling, activism online, survey fatigue, and increasing anger from the public. The thing is, giving feedback on subtle and complex topics is really hard. What I've had to do is paying people for their feedback via focus groups or surveys or survey incentives, especially with young people. It's really hard to get feedback on complex topics. We are competing with all these other things for people's time. I can't really rely on people contributing to the greater good, something bigger than themselves, to give their feedback. We really, really have to work for it. All these other things in people's lives, that's just one thing, giving feedback. Our convenience factor expectations of government and of organisations are much higher. We expect all feedback mechanisms to be on tap. We expect to be able to have our say when we want it and when we want it. And this search for convenience, this thing that is happening in our lives, the search for convenience, like other areas of our lives, with too much choice, has made us frustrated, sad and angry. So what do we do from here? Are we destined to become so-called slacktivists forever? Destined to never realise how lucky we are? Do we need to think about, with this increasing switch in on-demand services, do we need to think about a new model of democracy? Well, perhaps there is a solution and it lies with all of us. On-demand democracy is a symptom, but there may be a remedy. And there are three things. Building trust. Organisations need to build trust with their communities, and this needs to keep happening. The organisations that have the most trust are the ones that do the best. Decision makers. You need to listen, and elected representatives, really listen to the conversations that are being had and to really seek out all information prior to making a decision. And all of us, as citizens, we need to keep our decision makers accountable and perhaps think about sticking up our hand for those roles in future. We really need to make sure that we do all of these things in order to create that world that we want in terms of engagement. So maybe in that small country town, I wasn't that ignorant after all. Because when there's a tragedy or when there's a problem in a small community or in a tight-knit community, everyone always rushes in and helps. I believe that when our communities get together,